Greetings, I am the Red Prometheus, and welcome to my channel. The figure of the clown, once a vibrant archetype of catharsis and satire, today evokes discomfort more often than mirth. When I look at the unsettling visage of a corporate mascot, or witness the cringe of a lone performer struggling for a laugh, I see the modern clown as a relic, an almost pitiable vestige of a forgotten era. My argument is that this shift is not merely aesthetic drift, but a profound cultural symptom. It reflects a societal apathy of irony that paralyzes genuine engagement. To truly understand the clown's modern predicament, I believe we must grasp a deeper malaise, a widespread fear of sincerity, a retreat from the collective participation, and the chilling absence of vigor in contemporary cultural life. Ultimately, I propose that the clown can only regain its transformative power by embracing an unashamed, even fascist intensity, a willingness to perform absurdity with conviction, even unto a kind of crucifixion. Let me be clear, this is not a call for political allegiance, but for a fearless adoption of a temperament that does not shy away from its own dramatic truth. The modern experience of cringe lies at the very heart of clown's precipitous decline. Historically, the clown occupied a privileged, even sacred position. I see this figure acting as a liminal presence, existing between order and chaos, decorum and transgression. From the jester in medieval courts, licensed to mock kings and interrupt solemn rites with their irreverent wisdom, to the improvisational figure of Commedia dell'Arte like Harlequin, Pulcinella, and Columbina, who embodied satire, physical comedy, and profound social commentary. The clown, for me, was a vital agent of societal release and truth-telling. These performances, rich in improvisation, exaggerated gestures, and direct audience interaction, thrived on a shared understanding of theatre as a dynamic, reciprocal event. The audience, I contend, was not a passive recipient, but an active participant. Their laughter was a bond forged in the suspension of disbelief and the collective embrace of absurdity. This, to me, was a theatre as ritual, as communal catharsis, where the boundaries between performer and spectator were fluid and permeable. The very spontaneity of Commedia meant that no two performances were identical, fostering an immediate, unrepeatable connection that demanded presence. Today, this communal embrace has fractured. It leaves the modern performer in what I can only describe as a desolate landscape of detached observation. When I see a solo performer, be it a clown with painted tears and oversized shoes, his efforts earnest and vulnerable, his voice perhaps squeaking with an unfeigned desire to connect, or an amateur dancer attempting an impromptu jig in a public space, risking personal dignity for a fleeting moment of joy, attempting to evoke a response, the audience often recoils. They observe with peculiar blend of fascination and discomfort. Their amusement is tinged with an almost visceral cringe, rather than engaging directly. This phenomenon, which I believe can aptly be described as the bystander effect, made theatrical, sees inaction feed inaction, creating a vacuum where genuine connection once thrived. The collective energy required for a true comedic or dramatic resonance has dissipated. It is replaced by a pervasive sense of awkwardness, a palpable social entropy that chills the very air around the performer. The few who dare to participate stand out starkly, often feeling paradoxically more exposed in their sincerity than if they had remained aloof. Unlike the boisterous, uninhibited and truly participatory spirit of the European carnivals, where social hierarchies were inverted and collective revelry reigned, or the inclusive nature of traditional folk dances, where shared risk transformed the absurd into the sublime, the digital age has cultivated an audience of isolated spectators. Each is encased in their own private bubble of curated reality. This widespread retreat from the participation directly affects the clown, as their effectiveness relies on the audience's willingness to engage. The proliferation of small-screen and bite-sized media, the endless scroll of TikToks, Reels, and YouTube Shorts has fundamentally reshaped our relationship with performance. It cultivates an insatiable demand for compressed, hyper-stimulated content. These platforms offer a simulated engagement, a dopamine drip of immediate gratification, delivered with meticulously curated aesthetics and rapid-fire editing for maximum intensity per square inch. This often feels more real and immediate than a live human performance, however earnest. The raw, the awkward, the unrefined, which are often the very stuff of authentic live performance, are no longer credible. They simply do not compete with the post-produced, perfectly filtered digital persona. This hyper-produced reality fosters a culture of passive consumption. It trains us to swipe, to skip, to filter, to intellectualize our reactions rather than feel them viscerally. This pervasive irony poisoning has rendered sincerity a suspect. It reduces any unmediated, vulnerable attempt at performance to a potential target of ridicule. It becomes a moment ripe for being screen captured and mocked online. As Mark Fisher argues in Capitalist Realism, and I find his observation deeply resonant, postmodern irony creates a sense of inability to imagine alternatives, fostering a pervasive atmosphere where genuine engagement feels impossible, leading to a cultural stasis. Performers are left in perpetual hanging high five, a gesture offered but unreceived. It is an authentic offering met with cold silence. The audience, hyper-aware of its own image, terrified of appearing uncool or uninformed, chooses to remain outside, judging rather than joining. Thus it perpetuates the very cringe it seeks to avoid. This creates a vicious feedback loop of disengagement where genuine enthusiasm is stifled by a pervasive fear of being seen as anything less than perfectly curated. The child, now accustomed to the immediate visually saturated world of their screen, responds not with spontaneous joy or genuine fear, but with a chilling numbness. Their capacity for spontaneous, reciprocal play is atrophied. They are trained to consume, not to participate. They spectate, but they do not dance. The corporate clown, epitomized by Ronald McDonald, serves as a particularly poignant symbol of this cultural decay and the cheapening of once noble art. His exaggerated features, once intended to convey simple mirth, now often elicit discomfort. This is a classic example of the uncanny valley, where artificiality too closely resembles life, yet falls short in a disturbing way. His permanently plastered smile, wide but unmoving, contrasts starkly with the eyes that appear disproportionately tiny and devoid of warmth. This creates a quality of sly, shifty eyes of an untrustworthy trickster. This visual dissonance hints at an underlying inauthenticity. The joy he projects feels imposed, not genuinely felt, leading to a subtle but profound sense of unease. Unlike a true clown who performs for and with the people, whose persona is built on vulnerability, improvisation, and direct human interaction, Ronald is a symbol of a system, a commodified whimsy. He is a static brand image, not an evolving, living, breathing individual. His purpose is purely commercial. He is designed for maximum brand recognition and sales, rather than the artistic expression or cathartic release. He is an advertising, not art. Beyond the corporate mascot, the broader category of the cheap modern clown also contributes to this sense of lameness and unease. The aesthetic degradation is immediately apparent. There is a pervasive use of disposable materials like plastic wigs that feel artificial and static. Polyester costumes in garish primary colors lack the nuanced textures and craftsmanship of traditional theater attire. This material cheapness translates directly into a lack of aura or sacredness, transforming what was once ritualistic garb into mere costume, devoid of soul or history. The performance itself often mirrors this material impoverishment. Gone are the days of risky, improvisational physical comedy and the subtle interplay between the sad and happy clown. Instead, modern clowning often devolves into predictable, pre-packaged routines for children's parties. These routines lack genuine wit, subversive humor, or impressive physical prowess. The traditional clown, whether the tragic Pierrot or the trickster Arlecchino, possessed a universal appeal. They engage audiences of all ages with layers of humor and pathos. The modern, safe clown, often sanitized and stripped of any transgressive edge for fear of upsetting a narrow demographic of young children, loses this universal resonance. It becomes bland and forgettable. The earnest but often formulaic efforts of these performers are frequently met with indifference. This is especially true for children already conditioned by the hyper-stimulation of screens. The resulting high five left hanging is not just an awkward moment, it is a poignant symptom of a profound disconnect, making the clown's sincere efforts appear desperate, even pathetic. Without the element of danger, transgression, or profound human vulnerability that characterized their predecessors, these modern clowns fail to compel genuine laughter or connection. They remain trapped in a state of unrequited sincerity. For the dutiful onlooker, a concept rooted in Stoic philosophy as exemplified by Marcus Aurelius, I see a profound obligation to resist this cultural entropy. like Aurelius, who emphasized the Stoic duty to play one's part in the cosmic drama, to accept fate and act with virtue regardless of external circumstances. I believe the dutiful onlooker understands that the silence in the face of sincere performance is unholy, and that participation is a necessary act of cultural preservation. We act because the call was made, and it is unnatural to let it hang. This, to me, is a quiet cultural heroism, a modeling of the very sincerity that society shuns, a meta-ironic duty, to act sincerely in a world that mocks it. Yet a path to resacralization of performance emerges from an unexpected quarter, the vigor of modernism. This is particularly as embodied by Futurism and its echoes in what I unapologetically call a fascist aesthetic. Unlike the deconstructive cowardice and perpetual doubt of postmodernity, which often prioritizes critique over conviction, fragmentation over totality, early 20th century movements, be it fascism, socialism, or communism, were characterized by an unadulterated narrative conviction. These, I submit, were the last political movements in the West to truly believe in themselves. They cast their visions as universal, totalizing narratives with a clear direction and uncompromising purpose. They offered not cleverness or perpetual doubt, but aerodynamic purpose, will, speed, and above all, violence channeled into meaning. What they shared was not content of their manifestos, nor necessarily their political aims, but their form, a white-hot, intense belief that forged new myths in the crucible of the industrial age. They represented a moment when the future was perceived as real, open, and demanding, propelling forward with a kinetic force. Their art, particularly the invigorating paintings of the Futurists, exemplifies this aesthetic. Filippo Tommaso Marinetti's aggressive manifestos, Umberto Buccioni's studies of speeding cars and dynamic forms, Carlo Carra's dynamic figures, Gino Severini's dancers, Luigi Russolo's Intona Rumori, were designed not for static contemplation, but for kinetic absorption. These works were a vital force, meant to agitate and compel. They created an atmosphere of pressure and rising internal energy that made viewers restless. They weren't meant to be stunning in the traditional sense, or beautiful in a classical, contemplative way. They were startling, agitating, even unsettling. They were visual manifestos, not shrines, works that demanded a response, a commotion from the observer. As Marinetti advocated for a brutal philosopher in the variety theatre, a performer who would assault the audience with glue, cabbage, and fake corpses, shattering bourgeois complacency. So too did the Futurists imbue their art with a sense of urgency and speed. It was a charge that didn't ask for devotion, but actively compelled the engagement. One doesn't just look at Futurist paintings. One moves with it. One doesn't just look at a Futurist painting. One moves with it, absorbing its dynamism, its velocity, its palpable sense of ethereal vigor, of windy energy. This aesthetic temperament, with its emphasis on velocity, confrontation, and total sensory engagement, I contend, holds the key for the modern clown. It provides the missing ingredient, velocity, a force capable of outrunning the deconstructive impulse of irony. The call for the clown to embrace a theatre of cruelty, as proposed by Antonin Artaud, further reinforces this notion of a radical, confrontational performance. Artaud, a 20th century French playwright, called for an intense, confrontational and total theatre that would break bourgeois comfort and assault the senses. He demanded a visceral, ritualistic, intensified performance aimed at the spectator's subconscious. He sought to replace psychological realism with stylized, often grotesque movement, explicitly drawing from Commedia dell'Arte, circus, and buffoonery. Artaud's vision, with its emphasis on breaking down the fourth wall and directly impacting the audience, resonates deeply with the idea of a fascist clown, a performer whose energy is absolute, whose conviction is unyielding. He moves faster than the irony can deconstruct, he laughs louder than doubt can suppress, and he ultimately demands a response from a dead-eyed crowd. The provocative assertion that the clown will be a fascist is not a call for political endorsement, but for an aesthetic and temperamental alignment. It means embracing the same unashamed theatricality, the will, form, violence, discipline, ecstatic unity that characterize these movements. It is about performing with a radical sincerity that transcends the self-consciousness, facing ridicule with the defiant conviction of "me ne frego", I don't care. This iconic Italian phrase, often associated with the fascist rhetoric, embodies not indifference or apathy, but a profound awareness of potential transgression, coupled with a resolute, almost spiritual commitment to the act regardless. It transforms potential humiliation into a potent source of power. When I envision a fascist saying "me ne frego" while marching in a ridiculous uniform, or a clown saying it juggling in a silent room, I see them both signaling conviction despite humiliation. This posture allows for the necessary theatrical charge that can compel an audience to react, to move, and crucially, to laugh again. It is a return to an excessive sincerity, a willingness to own one's ridiculousness as the purest assertion of ego against entropy, a bold affirmation of the act itself in the face of disengaged world. The historical link between Italian theatre and fascist spectacle is crucial here. It illustrates a direct lineage of public performance evolving into political myth. From the improvisational dynamism of Commedia dell'Arte, which fostered a direct and mediated relationship between performer and the audience, to the hyper-theatricality of figures like Gabriele D'Annunzio and Benito Mussolini, I trace a thread of performative conviction that runs deep. D'Annunzio, a poet, playwright, and a nationalist, famously blurred the lines between art and life. His occupation of Fiume in 1919 was less a military campaign and more a grand performance, art commune, rich in invented rituals, stirring symbols, and bombastic oratory, effectively turning political action into immersive spectacle. He was in essence the clown of power, a boastful, poetic martyr figure who embraced absurdity but revelled in it. Marinetti and the Futurists were even more explicit in their clown fascism, advocating for a theatre disruption and violent parody. They effectively demanded that performance be aggressive, participatory, and anti-psychological, but above all sincere in its kinetic assault on bourgeois sensibilities. Marinetti's The Variety Theatre Manifesto of 1913 explicitly calls for mock executions and ironic martyrdoms on stage, demanding a theatre that is violent and laughing, not solemn. Mussolini himself was a master theatrical animal. He was called the actor dictator, even by his admirers, a testament to his profound understanding of public spectacle. I observe his deliberate performance of the role as Il Duce, with exaggerated gestures, chin raised, chest forward, wild gesticulations, and public displays of physical prowess, like posing shirtless or astride a horse, yet always in earnest, imbued with a conviction that transcended showmanship. In his speeches and writings, particularly in early Avanti journalism and the Popolo d'Italia, Mussolini frequently spoke of sacrificing dignity, embracing ridicule, and playing the fool before victory. He demonstrated his profound belief that spectacle was power, a means to galvanize and unite a nation. His posturing was often mocked abroad, but it was precisely this theatricality that made him a spectacle of conviction, allowing him to act as if possessed by an idea, captivating a nation hungry for meaning and direction. As he famously proclaimed, "I would rather be ridiculed and triumphant than prudent and defeated." This stark statement encapsulates his willingness to shed any pretense of dignity for the sake of ultimate victory, echoing the clown's own abandonment of self-consciousness. In a 1925 speech, he powerfully asserted that the theatre is one of the most effective means of propaganda. Il teatro è uno dei mezzi più efficaci di propaganda. This direct equation of theatre with political efficacy underscores his understanding of performance as tool for shaping collective will, for engaging with the masses viscerally rather than intellectually. And in another place, distilling his entire approach to public persona, he declared, "Il fascista non teme il ridicolo." The fascist does not fear the ridiculous. This willingness to be cringe and free, to embrace ridicule for the sake of conviction, is to me a stark contrast to the modern cultural condition, where the fear of embarrassment stifles genuine expression. Mussolini's theatricality was not an act of deception, but an act of totalizing belief. A performance so sincere it compelled participation and bypassed the critical faculties dulled by ironic detachment. This brings us to the essay's central poignant image, the crucified clown. Here I see the clown not as mere victim of external forces, but as a martyr to societal apathy. He hangs his head not in rage at the world's indifference, but in profound self-disappointment for his perceived failure to connect. He gave his all, performed earnestly, even desperately, offering himself without reservation, and still the crowd sat inert. The high five was left hanging. The joke was met without a response. He died, I contend, because we feared to laugh. This powerful image draws on a rich tapestry of archetypes and philosophical concepts, transforming the clown into a universal symbol of unrequited sincerity. It evokes the Christ figure's ultimate sacrifice for humanity, where the foolishness of God is wiser than man. Corinthians 1:25, suggesting a divine folly that transcends conventional human wisdom and dignity. The clown's suffering becomes a mirror to a spiritual void. It echoes Nietzsche's madman, who cries truth in the marketplace, only to be met with blank stares, ignored by those who have already killed God. It also recalls the philosopher's own descent into madness, symbolized by his empathetic embrace of a horse, representing a profound connection to the suffering and unacknowledged aspects of existence. For Nietzsche, the ability to embrace the tragic and the absurd, to affirm life despite its suffering. The crucified clown embodies this tragic affirmation. The image also connects to historical holy fools, or Eurodive, in Orthodox Christianity. These were figures like Saint Simeon Salos, who embodied absurdity, pretended madness, and lived radical humility as a form of spiritual challenge to societal norms and hypocrisy. These sacred clowns, like medieval jesters, and figures from the carnivalesque described by Mikhail Bakhtin's in Rebelles and His World, used laughter not as mere entertainment, but as a profound subversion. It was a means of purging, transforming, and dethroning established order through grotesque realism and joyful inversion. Bakhtin's carnivalesque is a space where norms are suspended, authority is mocked, and the world is turned upside down, fostering a collective, uninhibited laughter that is both liberating and terrifying. The crucified clown embodies a sincerity so potent it becomes unbearable to a world steeped in irony. His vulnerability is too raw, too analog for a public accustomed to hyper-produced realities. He is a noble fool, exiled in plain sight. He is a sincere in a time that punishes sincerity, lively in a world that rewards detachment, in a culture of spectatorship. His humiliation is transformed into a profound offering, meant to liberate the audience from their self-imposed ironic cages. It allows them a moment to suspend shame and truly engage. Yet in the absence of a willing response, it becomes a silent self-sacrifice, a final unrequited gesture in a theater where no one claps. The tragedy lies not in the clown's actions, but in the audience's refusal to dance with him, to share the risk of vulnerability, leaving him to embody a collective failure of connection. This poignant silence underscores the depth of cultural decay. The clown hangs his head not in rage or contempt, but in mournful self-disappointment, a brave soul abandoned by cowards. The tragic mirror of the modern left in this framework reflects this critical distinction and embrace of absurdity. While both contemporary woke aesthetics with their often flamboyant self-conscious performances and MAGA phenomena with their unashamed theatricality can appear equally ridiculous to an external observer, yet crucial difference lies in self-awareness and the handling of the ridicule. The wokies are, in my view, tragic clowns, unaware of the comedy, deeply paralyzed by the fear of cringe, and constantly policing their own optics for perceived problematic elements. Their performance, despite its overt flamboyance, the brightly colored hair, the nose rings, the deliberate fashion choices, is often characterized by a deep anxiety, a terror of self-contradiction, which ultimately breaks its spell. Their irony, unlike the clever, caustic irony of Wilde or Nietzsche that might dismantle illusions with intellectual precision, is often a defensive mechanism, an insulation against genuine emotional risk. It is an irony as insulation, as David Foster Wallace described it in E Unibus Pluribus, Television and US Fiction, a cultural virus that renders authenticity suspect and emotionally impotent. The defensive irony fosters a culture where sincerity is humiliating, where only fools dare to believe in anything unironically, and where irony itself becomes a social deodorant for any trace of emotional sweat. Conversely, the MAGA clowns are seen as not caring. They embody the Mussolinian dictum previously discussed: the fascist does not fear the ridiculous. Me ne frego. This willingness to be cringe and free, to embrace ridicule for the sake of conviction, is to me a stark contrast to the modern cultural condition, where the fear of embarrassment stifles genuine expression. Luigi Pirandello's philosophical plays, particularly Six Characters in a Search of an Author and Uno Nessuno e Centomila, One, No One, and 100,000, offer a profound lens through which I view this dynamic of identity and performance. Pirandello explored the fractured nature of identity, arguing that selfhood is always performative, a collection of masks worn for different audiences, no one of which fully capture the true self. The difference, he implies, is whether the performer fears that fracture, the inevitable inconsistencies and contradictions the multiple 100,000 selves others perceive, or plays with it. The fascist and the clown in this new vigorous incarnation chose to play. They do not fear the multiple selves, the absurdities inherent in self-presentation. They embrace them as a part of a total, unironic spectacle. This embrace allows for a political performance that, while often mocked by those insulated by irony, achieves a powerful message precisely because it is delivered with an unadulterated sincerity. The laughter it provokes in its adherents is not one of mockery, but of recognition and shared conviction, a stark contrast to the sterile silence or performative disgust of the ironic observer. This explains why a culture that cannot believe sincerely in clowns may eventually believe fervently in flags and blood, not because they are rational, but because they make the high five connect again. They restore the circuit of collective, unironic participation. In conclusion, the fate of the clown, and by extension the vibrancy of our collective cultural life, hinges on a stark choice: laugh or die. The crucified clown is not merely a symbol of decline, but a final, desperate invitation to re-engage, to break the silence and to rediscover the sacred gesture of shared experience. To become better audiences is to become participants in the act of living together, however absurd. It is to understand that when even the clown is met with silence, when sincerity is pushed and irony reigns supreme, culture itself begins to suffocate. The clown then is not failing because he's lame, but because the crowd refuses to dance with him, paralyzed by a social egoism that prioritizes self-preservation over shared experience. The return of laughter, then, is not just about entertainment. It is about the courageous acceptance of absurdity, the reignition of vital force, and the defiant refusal to let the final high five hang in the air, unreceived. It demands a collective willingness to shed the insulating cloak of irony and step, however awkwardly, into the communal dance of genuine human connection, revitalizing the very essence of shared human experience. This is the only path towards a cultural rebirth, a reconnection with the vital forces that once animated performance and collective life. Without it, the crucified clown will remain a silent testament to a society that died not from tragedy, but from a terminal case of unholy quiet. His suffering, then, is our own, a reminder that if we cannot laugh with him, we may yet weep for what we have lost, and perhaps eventually for what we ourselves have become. The future of laughter, and indeed of authentic human connection, depends on our willingness to risk the ridiculous, to say, me ne frego. Thank you for listening.